All right, traders, welcome back. We had an interesting week of trading last week. The movement we were looking for finally came on Thursday. I got an interesting thing about that. My wife called me on Thursday as I was watching the SPY, trying to figure out how come the SPY wasn't selling off the way I had expected all week. And she called me and told me there was a shutdown. And at the same time she was calling me, telling me this, just before she called, I had noticed that the SPY had started to pick up speed heading down. And she called, said it was a shutdown, and my response to her instantly was, well, that explains why the SPY is selling off all of a sudden. So, um, when I say that, the news doesn't make the trade, it just verifies why it works. That's what I mean by that. I had already been expecting the SPY to sell off. We were trading, you know, in a bit of a zone anyway, and I had some levels that I had were specifically set for the SPY. If they failed, then I knew I was going to go short, and if they, if it held up above those levels into the end of the week and into next week, then I was going to go long. And today's date, by the way, is March 28th, 2026. And so at that point, I was like, okay, so that verifies what I've been waiting for. And I looked at my chart, and I'm going, okay, we're below the averages and the indicators that I've been using. And I go, okay, so we're going to continue to sell off. So I went heavy on the short, and sure enough, had a nice trade for the end of the day on Friday. So I said all that to say this, that the news um, can be a catalyst in any direction, but the structure of your trade should already have been set, and the news is just what you need in order to help make your trade that much better. So let's take a look at the major indices, and then we'll discuss a couple of things. I want to give you a little tidbit on how I kind of do this stuff or structure my trades, and hopefully it'll help you. If you stick to the end, you'll get it. If you don't, sorry about your luck. So first up is going to be the S&P. Of course, we already have that up, and we can see it's below the 200 here. The 200 I have the 200 EMA and the 200 SMA, so I use them both just because I like to do that. And the same thing with the 20 and the 9. I believe that's the 9. Oh, they're both 20s. So I got two 20s, EMA, SMA, and I got two 200s, EMA and SMA. And so that's what I like to do. So anyway, that's the S&P. Then we got the Bitcoin continues to sell off. As you can see, Bitcoin has been below its 200 for a while now. And we can go out to a further time frame and look at it, but it's been below that since it hit 127. It's been falling off ever since. Then next up is going to be the oil, and oil continues to go higher. Now, oil, if it continues to go higher, is going to continue to put pressure on the rest of the stocks. And the reason that is from what I understand, is that oil is kind of pressure on the market based on, gas prices go up, then everything kind of slows down. Your work's going to slow down because, all the work trucks and stuff, that stuff takes gas. And if gas prices go higher, well then, more money is going towards gas and not towards other things. And so you kind of stop spending money in other areas because you got to pay gas, and most of us have to travel to work. So that's my take on that part as far as oil. So as long as oil continues to go higher, then we should continue to see the rest of the market go lower. Next up is going to be Ethereum, and it's selling off like Bitcoin. Next up is going to be the gold, and gold is starting to take a turn to the downside. It still has its 200 here and 200 EMA and SMA, so it hasn't actually gone into a downtrend or into a correction, but it is coming down to test, and it may just be coming in to check in to head back out. So we'll see what happens with gold. Next up is going to be the natural gas. Natural gas I don't really follow too much. Next up is NASDAQ, and the NASDAQ, as you can see, is selling off a lot more than most of them. It took a big dump for the last couple of days. And next up is going to be silver. I think that's silver. No, that's the Russell. I'm sorry. The Russell's been kind of a laggard. The Russell, once the Russell gets going, it's going to really fly. So we have to keep an eye on the Russell. There's some ETFs you can trade on the Russell. Well, actually, there's some ETFs you can trade on all of them. Russell, there's one that probably moves better than others. Same thing with the SPY. There's some that move pretty well rather than others. So you have to kind of pick your poison on those. Next up is going to be the silver, and silver is doing like gold, kind of checking in, and maybe it's going to head back out or it's going to continue to go lower. So we'll see what happens with that. But we do know we have our 200s acting as support or in a support area. Next up is the Dow, and the Dow is selling off like the other indices, major indices. So we got our major indices that are selling off. We got the S&P 500 that are selling off. We got the SPY. We didn't look at the SPY. Let's take a look at the SPY. The SPY finally gave us what we were looking for. Like I said, I was watching the SPY, waiting for it to sell off, because that's kind of my go-to guy. And sure enough, it finally did what it was supposed to do. But it had been hinting around selling off for a while now, because it kept putting in these little, I like to call them evening star reversals, but whatever you want to call it, you can call it whatever you want. But it kept putting in these dojis and selling off. It would put in a push up and doji and sell off, push up, doji and sell off. So it kept making lower highs and lower lows. So I had a feeling it was heading down to get in here. But once it got into this zone in here, it kept bouncing around for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days. And so we would get a push up in the morning and then a sell off in the evening. Push up in the morning, sell off in the evening. And so it kept doing that. And then finally, it did a push up and then sold off. But it wouldn't break this major pivot area that I had. And so I'm going, what the heck is going on here? And then finally, I got the news on Thursday of the shutdown, and sure enough, it pushed through, and then Friday it continued to follow on through, and that's where we're at with the SPY. Now, I like to watch the SPY because I like to trade Rocket Lab, and Rocket Lab moves very well with the SPY, and so I kind of use the SPY. So when I'm trading Rocket Lab in other stocks like Tesla and those things. Tesla is kind of its own creature, but it does also, respond well with the SPY, because the SPY, like I said, is my guy. All right, so we got our breakdown. Our low here this was our zone that we were playing with. This is where we were putting our levels. Pivot here. 656 is where we wanted to stay above, and that was our zone. If we got above that, then we knew we were continuing higher. If we got in here and traded around and then sold off, and we knew we were going to wait for our pivot to see if it held. It didn't hold. And then our 644.68 was our low of this one here. And so we broke that, and then we picked up speed to the downside with the news of the shutdown. So here we are now. Okay, so now we have this huge bar. This is 3 days of trading, but it's basically the whole week of trading, because we fell. This right here happened on the 325. Right, this right here was 324. Okay, 323 and 320. So this was that Friday. We got that close, popped up on that Monday, and then it messed around and then finally sold off. So anyway, here we are, and so this zone, all right, is still relevant, but not really relevant. All right. What I like to do is I like to break these bars down. All right. I'll take my, I don't know what you trade on, but in here I'll take my my level. What is it called? They call it here. My drawing tool. It's on here. It's called quadrant lines. I'll take my quadrant lines and I'll draw them here, and then I'll bring it up here to the top of that. And so I'll edit my quadrant lines. Alright, so the high of that bar was 642.66, which it shows up here. It would be that number. This is going to show the open, high, low, and close. And this is a think or swim chart. Okay, so the high of that bar was 642.66. Okay, so I'll take this, make it 642.6, right? Confirm it, yep, 642.66, and then the low was 633.11. I make it 633.11. All right, and I'll say okay. Oh wait, I like to set the colors to blue so they stand out and I can see it better. Alright, so then I go down to a smaller time frame. I like to bounce between the 5 minute and the 2 minute. If I want to get more precise with the movement of the stock, then I'll go to the 2. But generally, I'm sitting at the 5. I like to give the opening trade at least about 3 to 4 minutes to kind of make up his mind what he wants to do. The first 2 minutes are good sometimes, and sometimes it's not really what we need. So, the smaller time frame, we know we got this area here that we didn't really get this 632 according to the daily bar, but we see here in the after hours we got 632.27. So we'll keep it the way it is. Then we'll head into Monday. When Monday comes up, we're going to see what this thing is doing. All right, we're going to take a look in here and see if we're going to get up here, get above our moving averages, and continue higher, or if we're going to hit our moving averages and head lower. So this is going to be our zone for Monday on the smaller time frame, because right now we know the market's selling off, so we don't really expect the market to go higher, but if it does, then it should do it with some force. If it doesn't do it with some force, then we're just probably going to bounce up in the morning, sell off in the afternoon. Okay, so be careful with that part of the trading. In the morning, we most likely are going to have a little push higher, because after the big sell-off, like we did back here, I'll go back here and show you again. All right, because this is what happened. All right, when back here, when we got this sell-off here, we hit down here, and then we bounced. We pushed all the way back up into here, sold off a little bit, bounced again, and then we finished selling off. Alright, so it was like a ball hitting this level here. Alright, say it came out the window, it's been falling. Alright, it's been falling from this, I don't know what you're going to call it, window, cliff, high wall, whatever. It's been falling. Here it picked up speed and bounced. And it bounced at this level, and then it fell on through. Alright, so with this speed of the fall here, I'm expecting it to either continue to fall until it hits another floor, okay, or we get another bounce and then another fall, okay, and that way we're making our lower highs, our lower high, lower lows, lower lows. Okay, so this thing just keeps bouncing on down, and then here it kind of went sideways, or bounce, then picked up speed again. So we may get a little bit of continuation and then a bounce back up to retest this area here, this pivot zone, or one of these areas. Okay, especially if the SPY comes down. All right, see in the after hours was where we're going to be checking. Come the pre-market on Monday, we're going to look at the SPY and we're going to see what the SPY is doing pre-market. Okay, if pre-market, if we're above these moving averages, heading back up, then we know that, okay, we need these moving averages. When it gets above them and comes back and check for some support, if it continues higher again, then we're going to jump back into Rocket Lab and buy some Rocket Lab and ride it up as far as it goes until the SPY either gives up its moving averages and starts heading back down, or unless it continues to head higher. All right, so that's the trade on the SPY with Rocket Lab coming on Monday. All right, that's how I plan on trading the Rocket Lab, and also I'll be looking at Tesla and some other stocks too. Say volume, people call it volatility. I call it volume. I call it, some people say it is, volume is not necessary, but whatever you want to call it. I call it volume. You can call it volatility. You can call it whatever you want. But if you're in a stock that's not moving, you're wasting your time. If you're trading, day trading, if you're just buying stock and not really trading anything, then that's fine. You just buy it, once a month, dump some money into whatever stock you like, and go back to doing whatever you do every day. But if you're trading, then you need to be in a stock that's actually doing some movement, where you have some liquidity. And if you're not having liquidity in it, then you're just not going to make any money on that particular stock because it's not moving enough for you to make any money. So that's all I got for now. Thanks for stopping by. Glad we can catch up. See you around.